On fumes.
Good morning. We are going to get started. I think our task force is pretty much assembled. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Gwen Lackelt. I'm, along with Randy Cleveland, the co-chair of the Governor's Oil and Gas Task Force. I live in Durango, Colorado, and I am currently serving as a La Plata County Commissioner. We were just talking, this is the 5th meeting of the Governor's Oil and Gas Task Force, and after this meeting here in Greeley, we have 2 meetings left. We will be meeting, I'm hearing an echo. Can everybody in the back hear me? Can we get a raise, a thumbs up? Okay, thanks. We will be meeting February 2nd and 3rd and February 24th and 25th. Both of those meetings will be at the Convention Center in Denver. And I just have a few more comments. Looking back over the last few months, I had some time over the holidays to reflect on this process, and it struck me that our time together has been really short, and our charge is really huge. The governor has tasked us with developing recommendations that both recognize the economic benefits of oil and gas development in Colorado and the need to protect public health, water, the environment, and wildlife. These issues are not new to Colorado. I've been working on these issues now for 27 years in the great state of Colorado, and there have been a lot of new laws and regulations put in place to address the conflicts with oil and gas development. And despite all of that work and all of the new laws and regulations, conflict remains. We've been given 5 months to address one of the biggest issues in Colorado, and still our job is simply to make recommendations. That's a lot of responsibility, and I think we all feel that we have a lot of responsibility to make meaningful recommendations that truly address the oil and gas conflict in Colorado. After our work is done on February 27th, the real work, the lion's share of the work, will remain to be done. So we've got a long road ahead of us and a lot of work to do in just the few short weeks that we have left. And I know we're going to be spending a lot of time today and over the next couple of weeks really focusing on what our recommendations should be. I'd like to take the time to thank our presenters today for taking the time to put together their presentations. I'd also like to thank the public. We have received literally thousands of public comments, and it is really taking a lot of time to get through those public comments and to read the very thoughtful comments that you all have put together for us to read. So I want to thank you all for that, and I want to thank the task force. I've really been enjoying this process. We all bring our unique experience and perhaps biases to the table, but I feel like we have all had a lot of respect for one another and recognize our charge, and that's to do something meaningful for the people of Colorado. So thank you very much. With that, I'll introduce Randy Cleveland.
Thanks, Gwen. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to see everybody. I trust everybody. Everybody had a nice holiday season. I know for me, I did. I took some time to get some rest, and I'm sure all of you did. And Happy New Year to all of you. As Gwen said, I'm Randy Cleveland, the co-chair. I'm the president of XTO Energy, and selected by the governor as a co-chair. So welcome to everybody that's here today. I'm sure we're going to have a big crowd, and so it's really good to see everybody. And thanks to the task force, up front, because I know all of you have many responsibilities, and so taking the time to be here, I know is always a big effort. So I personally appreciate all of you making this a priority. As I reflected over the holidays a bit and thought a bit about this, and thought back to all the meetings we've had, but particularly the one that we had in Rifle. As I mentioned in Rifle at the last meeting, I kind of challenged the task force to start narrowing issues so that we can prioritize. And I think about it the same way today. I think as we get closer to meeting our objective, and certainly starting today in Healy and Greeley, I think I'd give the task force the same charge: continue to focus, prioritize, and collaborate. As we go through this. As I've said before, we're all here for a purpose. We all bring a very diverse perspective, and I'm a big fan of getting a diversity of perspectives. But we're challenged to work to try to find common ground, and that's going to be a challenge, as we well know. As we know, many members have strongly held views on the issues, but if we listen, continue to offer perspectives, I'm confident we can find some common ground. And I continue to reflect on, what does success look like? So when we get to the end of this, what does success really look like? And I think as we reflect on that, hopefully we can find some common ground. You'll recall at the last meeting we broke into 2 small groups. I personally thought that was pretty effective, and I think we're planning to do that tomorrow. But again, as we do that, continuing to narrow and not broaden the discussion, so I think we need to keep that in mind. I think with where we're sitting today, I think the benefits of oil and gas development, here in Weld County are significant and obvious. But along with that, we know that there are public concerns that come across with that, and that's really, I think we'll hear a lot about that over the next couple of days in trying to find that balance. But clearly, maintaining an awareness of the competitive nature and the dynamic nature of the oil and gas development and our overall industry. And of course, the governor gave us a charge that we wanted to continue to encourage a vibrant industry in Colorado, not stifle it, but fostering a climate that encourages responsible oil and gas development is really key to that. And I underscore the word responsible, because ultimately, certainly, my company as an oil and gas operator, responsible development is what we try to do. That's what our industry is all about. So I believe that we can do that. So I certainly, again, welcome you. It's good to see everybody after the holidays, and I look forward to the discussions over the next couple of days. So thanks.
Mr. Brisher?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment at the beginning of the day. We've met a number of times now, and I think we have all struggled with some things. And that struggle I would define this way. Some of us that are not members of the industry and not members of any environmental group have needed to learn enough about the viewpoint of the environmental world and understand enough about the industry so we can play an appropriate role in this process. I, for one, will tell you that has been a huge challenge. And I realize that because of that, we have given a huge challenge to the co-chairs. And that challenge is, how do you put together an agenda that keeps us moving along, but also gives us enough opportunity to hear from panelists and educate us all. And then at the same time, give us enough opportunity to talk to each other. And I have come quite a ways from when 2 meetings ago, I expressed a strong anxiety about getting to concrete proposals. But I want to tell you all that I appreciate the way you've been managing this process and letting us learn before we put out a proposal or consider a proposal that would be premature. And so I think the balance that I see in your efforts at putting together today's and tomorrow's agenda is that tension, is how do we get enough information and how do we move along and at the same time recognize the clock's ticking. And that's a challenge. I appreciate what you folks have had to do. And I do hope, Randy, I wrote down what you said. We've got to continue to narrow the issues. I think we've made some good progress on that. And I appreciate the folks who have been willing to talk to me and educate me about their viewpoints. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And that was Bernie Busher. If we can remember today, please, that folks are listening in from all over the state of Colorado and points beyond. So if we could try to remember to introduce ourselves before we speak. Could we please go around the room and have the task force members introduce yourselves? Mr. Pepler, can you begin?
Kent Pepler.
Good morning, I'm Brad Hawley from Anadarko.
Russ George, Western Slope.
Good morning, Steve Moreno, a former clerk and recorder. Looks like my title's been changed now to Weld County Commissioner.
And congratulations.
Peter D., Cirque Resources.
Perry Pierce, ConocoPhillips.
Tom Corliss, rancher, sitting in for my wife Becky.
Welcome.
Pat Quinn. I come ready. Pat Quinn, former mayor of Broomfield.
Dwayne Zavadil, Bill Barrett Corporations, sitting in for Scott Woodall.
Go ahead.
Christine Scanlon with the Keystone Center. We're here to help facilitate the conversation today.
And Sarah Alexander, Keystone Center as well. Without further ado, go ahead. Oh, sorry. I haven't finished, yes. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
Matt Sura, I'm an oil and gas attorney working for local governments and landowners.
Will Tour with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project and former Boulder Mayor and County Commissioner.
Sarah Barwinski, Greeley resident, well Air and Water, and an adjacent landowner.
Bernie Busher, attorney in Grand Junction and Denver.
Jeff Robbins, I'm an attorney out of Durango, Colorado. I represent local governments across the state in regulating oil and gas.
Good morning, I'm Elbert Wedgeworth. I'm the Chief Government and Community Affairs Officer at Denver Health.
Good morning, Jim Fitzgerald. I'm a farmer from Bayfield, Colorado.
Good morning, I'm Bruce Rao with Oakwood Homes and representing the Colorado Association of Home Builders.
I'm John Golden Dubois with Western Resource Advocates.
Dan Kelly with Noble Energy.
Great. And now, without further ado, we'd like to welcome Tom Norton, who's agreed to welcome us here to Greeley. So.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's on. Sorry about that. I thought I was going to be prepared, but I First, want to welcome you all to Greeley. Obviously, as mayor, it's much appreciated that you would come to the city of Greeley and have these discussions and to listen as well as debate the pluses and minuses. I was at the one at Loveland, and I know you've taken input over and over again, some on the same subject, and I'll do my best not to repeat those things. But I do have a letter here, and Councilwoman Sandy Elder is with me. She's going to pass out the letter, so I won't repeat myself about that, but we'll give you the opportunity to read it and understand where the city of Greeley is. I think there are three major points that I would like to make as part of my welcoming and what I believe is important to the citizens of Greeley. We have in Greeley the requirement as public officials to balance the two property ownerships that exist between the mineral owners and the surface owners. And in the city of Greeley, we have approximately 19,000 surface owners, of mineral owners that have the right to have their minerals extracted and get the money that those are worth. And there are many people in Greeley who contact us as city council and say, we want to be fair, but on the other hand, don't take our money away from us. So I want people to understand that our balance of that same number of people, there's about 20,000 or 22,000 property owners in the city of Greeley who have surface rights, some of which have both surface and mineral, some of which only have surface. But that balance is what is really, really critical in this overall process. So I want you to know that. I want you to know that we have had many years ago a vote of the Greeley citizens who voted a moratorium. It was taken to the state Supreme Court, and the city of Greeley spent about $750,000 in court and lost. We took that as a very serious clue that maybe we should figure out a way to sit at the table and work with oil and gas and with the surface owners to make sure that we put together the right process. So over the last number of years, since 1992, we've developed an in-depth process in which brings everybody to the table so that the permitting process can go forward. The third issue is one that I take fairly seriously, and that, as was reminded to me this morning, I was in the state legislature when the farmers and the oil and gas people had major battles, and I was on the side of trying to figure out how to help all my farmer friends in Greeley get their mineral rights, but also keep them from losing their ability to make money on the crops. Dennis Hoshiko, which is, I don't know whether he's testified or not, but he and I had more battles than you can imagine. And many of you may know Dennis. He's the onion man of Weld County. So that just brings to light that these are not issues that just go away. But the city of Greeley has been able to put together a regulatory process that we believe as long as you can keep people at the table, you can get it done. And that's really the critical issue from my perspective. Local control, being on the CML policy board right now, local control is always an issue. And local control is still an issue, but I believe we have local control sufficiently to manage what we do at the city of Greeley right now. So with that, I will not take up a lot of your time. I promised your people who, Sarah and all those who are in charge of trying to keep this under control and so forth, that I wouldn't get too carried away. But to the degree that the chairman would allow, I'd be glad to answer questions. Thank you very much, and we much appreciate it. We much appreciate you having Sarah Bowinski, a citizen of our nice little city, on the board and the commission and doing that. And we appreciate also my constituent, Mr. Steve here, being a part of this, this whole thing. So you're honorary members of the City of Greeley. We handed out little City of Greeley pins, so wear them proudly for the day, and you know, you can take them off if you leave town. That's okay. Thank you very
Mayor.
much.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
We will jump it right in then. This is Sarah Alexander with the Keystone Center, and briefly review our agenda. As Mr. Busher noted, we have continued to try to work with you all and the co-chairs to make sure you all are hearing from the outside expertise that you would like to hear from, but also continuing to maximize the time that we have for discussion. So there were several requests that came from the task force to Mr. Matt Lepore of COGCC and to Dr. Larry Wolk of CDPHE on some of their counsel with respect to some of the issues that the task force is considering. So this morning we will hear and discuss with Mr. Lepore his follow-up to the conversation that we had with him in Rifle. We will break briefly for lunch. I think that's where we're going to try to steal the minutes for starting a few minutes late today. And then we will break into task force discussion on the issues that we've been considering that were really started to vet in Rifle and continue those conversations, both in terms of the issue statements as well as potentially some of the possible sets of recommendations. So we'll go both a little bit from a procedural standpoint. We've worked out with the co-chairs some further thinking and clarity around how to move those forward into formal votes. So we'll spend a little bit of time just on the process of what that we think looks like for your feedback, and then also see if we can, as the co-chairs both have urged, continue our focus and narrow on the issues that the task force has talked about. We then finally will be bringing to you the Human Health and Public Safety panel. We have a good lineup of speakers for that panel and some time for task force interaction with that panel as well. As a part of that that panel, Dr. Larry Wolk will be providing his feedback based on some of the questions that came up in Rifle. We will end the day with some local perspectives from the Greeley region. Very brief remarks, but just to give you a little bit more of a sense of a flavor of some of the issues specific to this area that's obviously very important to the discussions of the task force. And then we will adjourn our discussions for public comment at 5 p.m. And then tomorrow we will spend most of the time in task force discussion. In terms of just some basic ground rules, again, Gwen already suggested that just as a reminder for task force members to introduce themselves into the microphone before making comments. Gwen's rule of any acronyms that go unexplained get $1, is that right?
$1 per unexplained acronym.
In the hat here. For those of you in the public, we are asking, we're very happy to make sure that the conversations are taking place so that you can hear what's happening, but we do ask from you from refraining from waving signs, applause, other kinds of interactions with the task force members as we continue our conversations and try to keep those conversations as productive as possible. Also along the ground rules, any questions about that? And then we'll get into the antitrust review of the antitrust statement, but any questions on that? Mr. Moreno.
Steve Moreno, Well County Commissioner. I just really wanted to comment on the minutes that were sent out. I was unable to attend as 3 other fellow task members in the Rifle meeting, and I was not in favor of breaking up into groups, and that, as you know, and after reading the minutes, it looks like it was very productive and a lot of good discussion. So I thank the fellow task force members that were in those discussions, and it was some great things to think about in that. So I thank you for the work that was done in Rifle.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Sir, should we tell the public about how we're going to do this?
Public comment, yes. While we're on sort of housekeeping and ground rules, for those of you who would like to make public comment starting at 5, there are 2 bowls where you can write your name on an index card in the back, and then those will be drawn at random. Each person who is drawn is allotted 2 minutes for comment to the task force. Because we have started to see this creep into public comment, we're asking that if you are present and able to speak for yourself, obviously we encourage you to do that, but we would like to ask that only the person who is called speak at that time, that we don't hand off lots of names, just to make sure, to be fair for the people who are in the room. If you have to leave, we understand and encourage you to submit comments via writing. You can see these big briefing packets that each of the task force members have. They get all of those and are able to review those as we go forward. And we will take public comments until 7. And if we start a little bit late, we'll go a little bit later. So, okay. All right. Any other questions on the agenda? Again, because we have some companies and organizations who are potentially competitors in this space, it's important that we remind everyone that we are in compliance with antitrust requirements. And I'm not going to read this statement. You've all seen it before, but just again, if you feel like we're venturing into territory that may be comprised of antitrust conversations in terms of prices, terms of sale, those kinds of things, please alert us immediately. The co-chairs or the facilitator, and we will cease discussion in that area. Any questions on the antitrust statement? And again, it's up here for you all to review. Okay, great. With that, I think real quickly, Kathleen, is there anything particular on housekeeping that we need to address? Okay. Sure.
I just wanted to let you guys know briefly, we put copies of the sort of informational presentation type materials at your desk this morning. We had over 200 pages front and back of public comment this time that we sent out in 3 different installments electronically. If you guys want hard copies of those, we actually have 5 sets of them over at the table, and we're happy to give those to you. We kind of figured that we were trying to cut down on trees, and if
Cut down trees?
well, cut
Cut down on cutting
fewer
down.
trees anyway. But if anybody, if you guys want hard copies, let us know. Otherwise, we were kind of thinking this might be the way we would go moving forward, just to try to cut down on the amount of materials that you guys are getting when you show up. Also wanted to remind everyone that the next 2 meetings, February 2nd and 3rd, and then February 24th and 25th, are going to be in Denver. They've been confirmed for the convention center, so we're going to have it downtown, which we will probably have lodging at the Embassy Suites Hotel. So if you need lodging, let us know early, because we've had some issues with hotels booking up. So we need to know kind of early on if you guys want hotel rooms. In addition, for those of you who live in the metro area, you can access the convention center by the light rail. We encourage you to use public transportation, but you will be reimbursed for parking if you need to come drive downtown. And then also, just a reminder for receipts, we need receipts for hotels and airfare. If you guys are looking for reimbursement for those things, we do not need receipts for meals, because the state reimburses on a per diem basis, so it doesn't ultimately matter how much you spend on your meal. There's a set amount that you're going to get. And I think that's it. If you guys have any questions about logistics moving forward, come let me know. If you know you need a hotel for the next couple of meetings, you can let me know as well. And we'll make sure that we get it taken care of.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'd like to move to approving the minutes from the rifle minute meeting, the summarized meeting minutes, as we're now calling them. We had some changes come in. They're mostly grammatical in nature, so presumably they should not be controversial in moving forward. But any further comments on the meeting summary that was sent out for the December meeting? Mr. Kelly.
I'm just checking the minutes that were left on our, there was a set out before, and then there's a set that's left on our, in front of us this morning. This is the revised set?
It looks that way, yes. That's correct.
Most revised set? Let me just clarify.
Yes.
Was there a set left for us this morning? Or,
I believe, yes, you guys printed those out, yes. So it is the same thing that went out yesterday.
all right, thank you.
Any comments on the meeting minutes? Is there a motion to?
Approval is revised.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce and Ms. Wedgeworth.
All in favor of approving the minutes? Please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, fabulous. That was the fastest approval of minutes to date. We're making progress. Without further ado, then we would like to open it up for the formal proceedings of the task force in terms of discussion and ask Mr. Lepore to join us up here, who will be sharing with us some reactions to some of the conversation that we had last week. And it will take me just a second to get your presentation up, Matt, because I lost it due to ineptitude at my mouse skills over here. So I'll get that up in just a second.
And this is Christine Scanlon with the Keystone Center. Just to refresh folks' memory, we did ask for Mr. Lepore to join us today, both to answer any further questions that the task force might have in reflection and work over the interim since we met in Rifle, but importantly to give us a sense of his organization and agency and what he feels he would need in order to have the greatest impact and run the most effective and efficient office. So we'll hear some of those recommendations as well. Thank you, Mr. Lepore. You want to get us rolling?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for asking me back. I really thought you'd have this all figured out by now, so I'll see what I can do to move the conversation. At the last task force meeting, a number of questions were put to me, some of which I answered as we went along, and others of which I said I would return and provide responses at this meeting. So that's where I intend to start. I have 5 or 6 topics that people ask questions about. I'm going to start by reading those to you so that we're all on the same page. And then, of course, giving you an opportunity to add to that list. While I have maybe 30-ish minutes of prepared things, I would welcome the opportunity to have that dialogue that I think has proven useful in past meetings. So the topics for discussion and for me to respond to some specific questions, the first of those was staffing. Does COGCC have the right amount of staff? Could we use more? If so, where? And what would be the justification? There were a couple of 3 questions about the operator agreements between local governments and operators, and I have some answers to those for you. There were questions about the ability of local governments to become involved in the permitting process from Task Force Member Tour. Questions about urban mitigation area best management practices from Ms. Corliss. And then Russ George's famous snake pit question, just tell us how to fix what's broken. So that's kind of where I thought I would start. We did send you some materials to answer some of these questions, and I would start with one of those, which is a little memo with a table, and the memo says ratio of active wells to field inspectors, a 7-state survey. Task Force Member Busher asked me what's the right number of inspectors given the number of wells in the state. In response, or in an effort to find a response to that, I asked colleagues, my counterparts in 6 other states, to tell us how many inspectors they have and how many active wells they have. So you have a memo that looks like this and a chart or table that summarizes the findings of those 6 states plus Colorado. The short answer is that the average of those 7 states is that there are 1,621 wells for each inspector in those states. 1621 to 1. However, it's worth noting that the range is pretty dramatic. Alaska has 371 wells per inspector. Wyoming has almost 3,000 wells for inspectors. So there's a range of, a factor of 10 in there. Colorado currently has 1,959 wells per inspector. So in my mind, the right number remains somewhat elusive. You can draw from these statistics that if you have fewer wells in your state, it's easier to have a lower ratio of wells to inspectors. We with 53,000 wells were third on the list of 7. Ohio has 64,000. Texas has a mere 350,000 active wells in the state. But as a starting point to get Colorado to that 1621, we would need to add 5 inspectors to the current 27 that we have. So that's where I started. So with that, I will direct your attention to the slides that we have. The first slide is up on the screen. You should have a handout from us in hard copy that looks like this. And you can see that we have 97 staff currently, and we are proposing to add somewhere between 16 and 22. A lot of that range, well, there's a couple of factors. During the 2013 legislative session, there was a lot of focus on growing the COGCC staff and a lot of focus on inspectors. And it's, I think, relatively self-evident that if we add inspectors, we need additional other staff to support the inspectors. It's not very useful to have inspectors go out and potentially find violations or identify issues that need to be addressed and not have environmental staff to follow up, not have hearing staff to follow up, not have engineering staff to follow up. So we came up and it just becomes evident that we can't just keep adding inspectors. So if I could go to the next slide. The bar chart shows our current staffing, again, 97 total distributed as you see on the bar chart. This bar chart includes our managers, so we have 28 in the field inspection. That includes the manager. Trust me, our inspection manager isn't out in the field conducting inspections, right? She's in the office running the program. So you've heard me say 27, that's why. We go to the next slide, please. If we added 5 field inspectors, we would also seek to add 3 engineers, 2 people in our permitting and information technology group, and I'll tell you about those, 3 people in the hearings group, and I'll tell you about those, and 3 in the environmental group. The environmental people would be environmental protection specialists who would do what EPSs do. They would investigate releases to the environment. They would follow through on those investigations, which are often very lengthy. Environmental investigations often span years. We need sort of both things. We need the ability to respond quickly to environmental releases and to shepherd those through in the critical early days, and then we need people who can see that they're ultimately closed out. The engineering group does things like flow line integrity tests. We did a risk-based inspection analysis a year ago. Contrary to maybe widely held beliefs, drilling and fracking aren't the source of the highest number of releases to the environment. It's production facilities, it's oil tanks, and the flow lines that move product to and between flow storage tanks. So we would like to increase the robustness of that flow line integrity program. The permitting and infotech persons, we would like to add 1 person that processes our permits. We're running at about 55 days to process a permit right now. That's above historic norms, and we would like to potentially keep bring that down a little bit. The other person that we need, in my estimation, very, very much, that goes into that group is a data analyst. It's a data-driven world more than ever, and we are asked for data on a daily basis from a wide array of stakeholders and constituencies, from the legislature to environmental groups to the media to industry. We get all kinds of requests for our data, and we have the data. We have an amazing array of data and volume of data, but retrieving it and making it available in the way that people want it is where we need help. So we would add a person to help us do that. On the hearings, we have 3 people here. 2 of those people would be dedicated to our complaint response system. There have been a lot of questions about our complaint process, complaint response. We just completed a lean process management project for our complaints. Very useful for us. We have a new complaint process published on our website to streamline that process, to make that process more transparent. But the critical path item for that going forward is 2 people dedicated to intake and tracking of complaints full-time. Right now, that work falls mostly on our field inspection group. Complaints take a lot of time. We often respond to a complainant location multiple times on a single complaint. We get a lot of complaints about odor and noise, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But we go out and we do sound surveys. If the wind blows too hard, we can't do the sound survey that day, so we have to go back. So complaints response takes a lot of time. If we're using our field inspectors to manage that process, that's not an efficient way to do this. So we would like 2 full-time complaint intake tracking persons and 1 additional person to help with the enforcement orders that we do when operators are in violation. That too takes a lot of time, and we want to use somebody in the hearings group, not somebody in the environmental group, for example, to do that process for us. So that first chart, these charts would, that totals an ask for 16 staff. I want to pause here and acknowledge that we are very aware of the fall in oil prices, and it makes it a very challenging environment right now for operators. And it means that our revenues, which about 75% of the agency's funding comes from a levy, a mill levy on the production, on the price, the value of that production. So our revenue forecasts for the next fiscal year don't look quite the same as they did last week, last month, back in July. So this is not even the ideal world. The ideal world is the next slide where we ask for 22. Okay? But by our estimation, drilling things that are in place are going to get carried out. What happens in the next 6 months after that, we're not sure. So maybe some of this does need to be reviewed in some period down the road. But I don't think anyone would question the necessity of not only a robust regulatory regime, which you all know by now that I believe Colorado has a robust regulatory regime, not a perfect one, not quite yet. Things change, things evolve constantly. But we need that robust follow through, the ability to be in the field and see these things, the ability to pursue violations when they happen. Right now, it's interesting to me. I think, and I know this is not sexy, and I thought maybe I wouldn't even talk about it, but I'm going to. We have a fabulous management team, 7 people who are dedicated professionals who know their job and their business inside and out. We have a large number of people, line level people out in the field. And we have this middle layer of kind of supervisor level people who right now they look like the stretchy people. I can't think of the name of that Disney cartoon, but they could be stretched to infinity. Miss Lackholt, sorry. Okay, Elastigirls. I'll take your word for it. Anyway, those are the people that get stretched because they're trying to do all of these different things. They're trying to be in the field. They're trying to manage. They're trying to do this data request that we get. They're trying to write the enforcement orders that we get. If we can give them some support, that means that, again, the field inspectors can do field inspections. The environmental people can do environmental projects and get those closed out. The complaints, we can take that burden off of field inspectors and engineers and have that process run smoothly. So that's kind of the global picture of, as I see it. If you'll go to the next slide, I won't belabor this, but again, if we were living in an ideal, not price-constrained environment, I think there is, or maybe you just hit space again. Oh, okay, yeah. Could you just put it on the slideshow view? Okay, it's hard to see, that's why. We tried to do this as sort of a gold level ask and then a platinum level ask. You have a hard copy of the fourth slide. It's just that we would add an additional 6 in that distribution shown to come up to 22. So, what you all want to recommend is entirely up to you, but I did want to give you a feel for that. We distributed to you a series of memos, again, same format, that are by design, brief and to the point, one-page kind of justifications, or give you the basic logic of why we're asking for the staffing that we're added. I am not going to spend time with that on the microphone, but Elbra in particular commented about the need to see the justification for an increase in staff. Of course, that's going to be important to the industry. It will be important to the legislators when we get there. But here's a very brief, to the point synopsis of those asks.
Mr. Lepore, we have a quick question from Pat Quinn.
Thank you.
Pat Quinn. Matt, I guess my question, and maybe you're going to get to this, my questions are, who approves increases in staffing of the COGCC? Your board? Or do you have to go further than that? Do you have to go to the legislature?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Quinn. We have to go to the legislature. The legislature has to approve that allocation, and they do it on a full-time equivalent sort of basis.
So what do they do for the fiscal notes? Since you have your own revenue source, does this have a fiscal note attached to it that costs out of general revenue?
Right. Sorry, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer this precisely technically correct. We provide them an analysis of what it would cost for the staffing, and then we look at our mill levy and our revenue projections, and we can determine from that whether we have the revenue in the existing mill levy. We can raise the mill levy up to the statutory cap by a rulemaking.
Okay.
We are not at the statutory cap. We're far below the statutory cap right now. So we could do that. We would never do that lightly.
Well, and I guess that gets the crux of my question. So you're funded by property taxes, and your mill levies is on the production. It's basically like a property tax, right?
It's tax on the value of the production, yes.
So I guess I view it as it's an ad valorem property tax.
Right.
And so there's a lag between the reduction in prices, at least a year lag between the reduction in prices and the reduction in revenues, if I recall. So your mill levies, your production values would have been set a year ago for the 2015 revenues?
I will actually check on that for you, Mr. Quinn. I don't know if it's set annually or much more frequently than that.
Yeah, because I'm, being a county, I'm familiar with, Broomfield, but there's a year lag. Because I guess my point comes down to you're increasing production that you're taxing, and so reduction in price doesn't necessarily mean that there's an immediate 2015 reduction in revenues unless your formula is different than a property tax formula. So being a CPA, I'm more than curious, and so. But you answered the other question that that if your revenues were down, would not cover these FTEs, then I'm assuming that you said your board itself, the commission itself, could approve a mill levy increase if we all agreed that this was appropriate. So there's ways to address both issues: the reduction in revenue and the need for more people.
I would generally agree with everything you said.
Good.
I'm not sure so much about the lag. The production is going to increase, but the production is not going to increase at 50% year over year. which is, where we are in the price fall right now.
Well, if somebody on your staff could give some idea, one of these 7 finance administrative could get back on, on exactly how, it'd just be interesting to see the forecasted revenues for you. Because I would suspect that if this is going to require money from the general fund, it would, it wouldn't pass.
Right, and it will not require money from the general fund. It would potentially require a mill levy increase. If I can find a printer, I can get you the information you're asking for before the end of the day. It's done. My finance manager has it.
Yeah, finances are obviously important, but if there's a level of staffing that you guys need to do your job appropriately or better, then we need to make sure the finances don't become the big issue. If there's ways to generate the revenue from the industry itself.
And I have cards from Mr. John Golden Dubois, Mr. Cleveland, and Mr. Pebler, in that order.
This is John Golden Dubois. Mr. Lepore, at our last meeting, you discussed with us the number of inspections that each, or how long it would take to get to each well. And I believe that you said each well would be inspected every 1.8 to 1.9 years.
That's correct.
How would this staffing equation change that number of inspections per year?
I could do the math pretty quickly, Mr. Golden Dubois. We expect a full-time field inspector to do roughly 1,000 inspections per year. So we would take the current inspections. We did about 30,000 inspections in 2014. So if we did 35,000 inspections, divide that into 54,000 and we'd know. It's not going to drop it dramatically, but it obviously takes it in the right direction.
So just as a follow-up, we'd still be at a place where each well is inspected less than once per year. And I guess I'm trying to understand, it looks in terms of what you've shot for here is essentially the middle of states that regulate on oil and gas. And I appreciate that. I guess I'm a Colorado exceptionalist, and I would argue that we can do better and that we should strive to do better. And I would really like to see us in terms of our inspections and our regulatory regime that we are, in that top tier of what it is we provide. And what would it take in order to do that?
Appreciate the sentiment. I would point you to the example of Ohio, which is one of the states we surveyed. I point you there for a couple of reasons. One, given that they have 65,000 wells and their ratio is 925 wells per inspector, that would put us in the range of being able to inspect every well once a year. I got to tell you honestly that whether that's the right metric, that every well gets inspected once per year, I think is a subject of some robust conversation. I think I've probably said to this group, I certainly said it to the legislature earlier last week. In our view, that's probably not the right metric. A well that's been producing right along for a good many of years, our inspectors aren't the only people that lay eyes on wells. The pumpers lay eyes on wells, the surface owners lay eyes on wells. Yes, we want to inspect them periodically, but not the highest priority. So we did this risk-based analysis. We have some metrics for determining wells that are maybe higher risks. That would include probably ones closer to neighborhoods, closer to surface water, older wells, wells that haven't been inspected in a long time, wells that have shown some history of problem. Those should be inspected maybe more than once a year. Certain phases of the operation, we could have somebody there when those phases are happening. So just to give a little context. But Ohio, within the last couple of years, their General Assembly authorized Ohio to have 70 inspectors for those wells that they have in their state. So that's greater than 2x where we are. Right now, they still have 21 vacancies. It takes time to hire and train folks. So if you look at what they actually have, their ratio is about 1,300 to 1. If you look at where they decided they wanted to be, it would get you in that 900 to 1 ratio.
Okay, that's helpful. Just one final point is I just would rather see us create this regime, inspection regime, around whatever the best management practices are And we've had some discussion about that over the course of our conversations here, rather than the average. I understand that the desire to find an acceptable number, but I just would encourage us to think through what are those high-risk places, how often should they be inspected, what's that regime look like, and that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lepore, for being here today, by the way, again. Just a quick question aside, as you mentioned, our oil and gas industry is very dynamic, prices change, activities change. Aside from obviously the financial impacts of that you spoke about, how, from an oversight standpoint, from your perspective, how dynamic is it in terms of, I mean, wells are wells and wells get plugged, wells get added, but in terms of, the increase or decrease in drilling activity, frac crews, a lot of the activity, how dynamic do you view your staff in response to activity that's ongoing as opposed to just wells? Does my question make sense?
I think so. Let me attempt an answer, and you can tell me whether I'm on point. Simplest answer is I think the staff is very dynamic, and some examples. Horizontal development in the greater Wattenberg, fairly challenging given that that's a highly developed field. Last 30 years, tens of thousands of vertical wells. Now you all are running horizontals kind of in between those verticals. Our engineering staff looked at that, identified, some challenges associated with that, unique to that circumstance, and promptly sat down with industry and had a working group and developed a policy around making sure that happened, in our view, in a safe engineering way. So that's an example. Another example, a lot of interest in having water on site available to conduct frac operations without having all the trucks. So these large above ground water storage tanks, mobile tanks, we call them modular large volume tanks, started emerging. Well, that's new. That's a new challenge for our engineering group, a new challenge for our environmental group, a new challenge for our permitting group. And again, I feel like we have responded timely and efficiently. So if I'm getting the nub of your question, that's my answer.
Yeah, that's helpful. What I'm really getting at, I'll be a little more blunt. At $100 a barrel, activity's been at very high levels, peak levels, right? If, as you think about this staffing in your organization, if, for example, activity went to a quarter of what it is today in terms of drilling rigs, or in the future it went to double what it is today, how does that impact your staffing levels? In other words, as you think about these staffing numbers, are you staffing for the peak that we've seen or for the level of activity that could be, depending on what operators in the area tend to do? That's really kind of what I'm curious about like I said, inspections of wells are one thing. Those wells don't go away unless they're abandoned. But I'm more interested in kind of the amount of time your staff spends on what I'd call current activity levels.
Right. Thank you. I understand better now. So how elastic is the staff? So I'm not sure we've had to confront what we may be having to confront for many years. There have been about 2,000 new wells drilled in the state of Colorado for roughly the last decade. Very reliably, steadily. I mean, obviously permitting and such peaked in 2008, and the number of drill rigs in the state peaked in 2008. I think, and I'd have to drill down into this deeper bad metaphor, but we tend to be playing catch up on staffing. In 2008 with rule changes affect this too. So 2008 rule changes, the world got more complicated, permitting gets more complicated, permitting takes longer. You can't do the same job with the same number of staff unless activity actually does go down. That's true of the 2013 setback rulemaking as well. looking at all those setbacks and the best management practices and all of that, far more complicated. So it's fair to say we've been in somewhat of a catch-up mode. The 28 people, that FTEs that the legislature granted in 2013 obviously was a big boost. We see our backlogs increasing in some aspects of the business, including environmental permitting and remediation, because as long as activity continues, there's going to be some spills and we have to respond to those. So there are a couple of areas, environmental engineering for sure, and the complaint process that I think we're not in a position to stretch very far. If things truly contracted, maybe we got to catch up on backlogs.
Thank you. I have Mr. Pepler, followed by Mr. Pierce, and then cards up for Co-Chair Lackold, Mr. Rao, and Mr. Tour. Mr. Pepler.
Kent Pepler. Is it on? Considering everything, what is a FTE going to cost? You got pickup costs there and transportation, and there's a lot of costs besides just the labor there.
You are correct, Mr. Pepler. Our field inspectors need a vehicle. We may need office space. We're pretty full up right now. But all that gets factored in. And then what does an FTE cost depends, of course, on engineers are more expensive than permitting tax.
But on an average, on what you're asking here?
I'd rather not speculate again. I can get you very specific information from our finance person.
The other thing is you're asking for about a 1,600 well to 1 ratio on inspectors. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess I would trust your judgment and your staff's judgment on that. I'm interested in your comment you made about we're always playing catch up. Might it not be better to put some type of standard within the rules of so that you wouldn't have to be always playing catch up and going back to the well for more money, that 1 to 1,600 might be the standard, and that you could staff for that on a continual basis. Is there a mechanism to do that, or is it possible to have a mechanism to do that in our current political environment?
You definitely just went above my pay grade. The mechanism would at a minimum have to be statutory, I believe. I believe you'd have to put in a statute something that directed that the ratio of inspectors to wells to inspectors be maintained at some number or some range. Again, if we could assume that we were going to keep doing roughly 1,800 wells per year, it's pretty easy, to do that. But things do go up and down fairly dramatically. Let me come back to your earlier question, because I do at least have not ballpark, but gross numbers. So for the 16 FTE ask, the ongoing costs for that, including things like vehicles and lease space, is approximately $1.6 million.
So that's 100,000 FTE roughly.
Right.
Pardon me. Would you be in favor of